What we've done in the short life so far is spend a lot of time trying to get out to understand exactly what the licence fee payer wants and expects of the BBC. And we've gone through a very substantial exercise involving more than 4,000 people in asking them what of the 6 public purposes of the BBC, which are the most important for them, and where do they judge there is the biggest gap in terms of what the BBC does at the moment from what they would expect. The one in which the biggest gap exists is this area of innovation, where people are, and we interpret that as people saying they want to see more novel programming, radio and television, to excite them into the future.
Easy to say. How do you ensure that the BBC delivers on that?
Well, it is a challenge, isn't it? And I don't for a moment want to suggest that the BBC hasn't, amongst its existing range of programmes, got very good examples of innovation. Indeed, the annual report this year covers, for instance, the Manchester Passion, an exciting new idea involving the public of Manchester. So the BBC has a track record of this, but what we're clearly underlining is the public want more.
One of the things that always comes up in this context is repeats. People say too many repeats. Now, the BBC is looking at a future in which it's going to have less money to make. It's going to be able to make fewer original programmes. How do you square that with this demand for innovation? Well,
we do address particularly the issue of repeats in our annual report, recognising that this needs to be looked at much more carefully. Because, again, coming back from the work we've been doing, is the fact that the public actually have quite a sophisticated view of repeats. There are some things which they don't want to see on their screens again because they've seen them too many times, but there's also an appetite to be able to catch up with programmes that they missed the first time round. So this is quite a complex map to work out, really. Just a simple less repeats, I think, can't possibly be right for the future, and we all have to acknowledge, with the licence fee being rather less than the BBC asked for, there will be pressure on every part of the sort of programming mix.
So will be more repeats, in effect?
Well, I don't think it's going to be as simple as that. And again, here we are falling into the trap of more repeats a bad thing. I think it's a question of understanding what the BBC want to see, particularly in terms of these so-called narrative repeats, an opportunity to come back again to see something that was missed the first time round, as opposed to the endless repetition of programmes which have been well seen and once enjoyed actually are past their sell-by date.
BBC's been accused in the past of copycat programme making. Somebody else comes up with a good idea, the BBC nicks it. Mark Thompson, the Director General, seems to be complaining now that the BBC comes up with good ideas for programmes, and other channels then then copy those. Is that something to be pleased about or to be annoyed about?
Well, I think you can take pride, the BBC can take pride when an idea that it comes up with, an innovation it makes, is actually picked up by others. But I think the message we're bringing back, the trust is bringing back from the public, I interpret it as that looking across the whole of broadcasting, people are looking for genuine innovation and novelty. And the message that we're sharing with Mark Thompson out of our research is, at the very same time that people are enjoying existing programmes, existing formats, nonetheless they're asking for more innovation.
One of the things the Trust's promising to do in the next year is look at the market for rights, and particularly for talent. Is the BBC paying too much for talent? Now, the very fact that you're looking into this implies that you think it might be, that it's paying some of its top-name presenters far too much.
Well, there's no assumption on our part that the BBC's strategy for paying for top talent is out of line. But what we do know is the public are concerned about this. And so the job of the Trust, representing the licence fee payer, is to explore carefully the dynamics of the talent market, to understand, we know for sure the BBC has to compete not only in the UK but sometimes internationally. We need to understand that and then decide whether there is any danger that the BBC goes beyond responding to the market into the dangerous ground of actually setting market rates.
Something else you put quite a lot of emphasis on, and that is the importance of the viewing and listening public trusting the BBC. Now, today, Michael Grade, your predecessor as BBC chairman, has made some very strong remarks suggesting that broadcasters have forfeited the public's trust. Do you think it's as bad as that, and what can you do about it?
No, I don't think it's as bad as that. Indeed, having looked at the script that Michael was speaking from, I think he doesn't go as far as actually saying this is a permanent damage done. He underlines the importance of trust, as indeed the the BBC Trust does in its report identifies as possibly the most important index for the BBC into the future. The good news is that all of our research shows that the BBC remains well trusted across the British nation, but frankly that's something which you just cannot be complacent about.
Let's talk finally about the role of the BBC Trust. It's a new institution. Listening to you and Mark Thompson today, there didn't seem to be a lot of space between you. You seemed very much actually like the old relationship of the BBC Board of Governors and its chairman and the BBC's Director General, and yet we were told the BBC Trust was going to be a very different and much more independent animal. So which is it?
Well, unequivocally, this is a different setting from the one that existed before. If you draw from today's presentation that we are both strongly committed to the BBC serving the public that pays for it, that would be a good conclusion to reach. If you draw from today's presentation evidence that there is a good quality of detailed debate about future use by the BBC of the licence fee monies, that would be a good thing. But make no doubts about it, the Trust is and will continue to be demanding of the BBC executive as to how it uses that public money, how it maintains the public trust, and how it offers value for money into the future. So I'm glad that the relationship is positive, and I have to say the discussion has considerable depth, but I'm very clear that the Trust has a job to hold the BBC executive to account on behalf of those who pay for it.
Yesterday you told BBC staff that the Trust was very definitely part of the BBC. BBC's commercial rivals might be quite disturbed to hear that.
Unequivocally, that's the case. The Charter lays down very firmly that the Trust is part of the BBC. It's the sovereign body that sets the standards, sets the framework in which decisions are made, and basically holds the Executive Board to account.